Compared to most people, I'm pretty easygoing when it comes to OCG exclusive cards and how fast or slow they get imported into the TCG. I understand why we have OCG exclusives, and I've made a couple videos talking about why the divide exists and also how there's not a great way to sort of solve it. I think as long as we get the cards within like 6 months or even a year at most, it's not that big of a deal. I know I complain about Fight for Patrick a lot, but in general, Konami sort of stays on top of things with most releases. I mentioned this because 6 months ago I made a video titled Bad Legacy Support in Yu-Gi-Oh! The actual theme of that video doesn't matter, but the important part is that was when the first batch of the new Crystal Beast cards were announced. Rainbow Overdragon, Rainbow Bridge, and Crystal Bonds, all those sorts of cards were announced that week, and we got those cards 5 months later, so I don't think that was a huge gap, and those cards are really good, and I think that they put them in the right pack. There wasn't a really great way to import those cards besides that Pegasus pack, and I was pretty happy with that. I don't think 5 months is that long to wait for a card. However, you might not know, but there were other Crystal Beast OCG exclusives that we're now getting. We're getting them in Flood, and they're going to be 4 of the 8 OCG imports that are going to be in that set. This was just leaked yesterday by the time this video goes up, and I'm pretty disappointed. So I'm disappointed for a couple reasons. First off, these cards have kind of all been power crept. Maybe one of them is good, and we're going to go through each of the 4 just so you guys can sort of get a refresher on what these cards do. But even when they were originally announced, which, spoiler alert, was way back in 2014, yeah, these cards were in the Japanese version of Secrets of Eternity way back at the November of 2014, and we're in 2018 now, and we are finally getting these cards. Now, it is kind of bittersweet because, like I said, they're pretty much not useful anymore for a couple reasons. Their effects just aren't as good compared to Crystal Bonds and Rainbow Bridge, but the other reason is that 2 of them are Pendulum monsters, and those were the better 2 of the 4 cards, and Pendulums, because they're now in the back row, really don't synergize well with Crystal Beast, where previously they might have actually had some utility, and these cards weren't even that broken back in 2015 when we got Secrets of Eternity. But yeah, this was like part of a horrible promotion. I don't think they do this anymore. It used to be for a while. So the Japanese sets had 80 cards, and then when we got a set, it had 100 cards. So we got 10 TCG exclusives and 10 OCG imports, and the reason that this happened is because the TCG doesn't get a lot of exclusive cards, so all that we have to do in Japan there is Japan gets one set that has all the TCG exclusives from like the last year. That's how they get our cards. Japan, on the other hand, they get a lot of exclusives throughout the years, and it takes forever sometimes to get them imported in here. I mean, they usually import the really big cards, but a lot of times the sort of lesser known cards or less impactful cards don't get imported until years later, which is what happened with these Crystal Beast monsters. But it also happened, if we look at the Secrets of Eternity Japanese set, they also had these sort of rank 10 train cards. So we had Revolving Switchyard and number 81, Super Dreadnought, Rail Cannon, Super Dora. Thank God I actually said that correctly. So they had sort of the main rank 10 train cards, and those got imported 2 years after that. So I guess that's twice as good as the Crystal Beast cards, because we had to wait 4 years for ours. You only had to wait 2 years for theirs. And yeah, I don't think they do that anymore. I think that the Japanese sets are back down to the 80 core cards, which I think is the way that it goes, because that lets them not get too far ahead of us. If you're wondering why these Crystal Beast cards have taken so long, it's because when you give the Japanese set sort of these exclusives in the OCG, it really sets them way ahead of us, because we simply don't have enough opportunities to sort of import these cards to the TCG. But anyway, I've kind of ranted enough. Basically, the point is these cards are super late and probably won't even be added to the modern Crystal Beast deck outside of maybe one of the Pendulum monsters, but we'll talk about that in a second. So without further ado, let's look at the 4 cards, analyze them, and talk about if they're going to be good now and how they would have been good 4 years ago. I might as well start off with the best of the 4 cards, and that is Crystal Vanguard. So this card is the one card that I think might be played, and even then it's kind of iffy. So it's Pendulum effect is your opponent cannot target Crystal Beast cards you control or Ultimate Crystal monsters, which is Rainbow Dragon, Rainbow Overdragon, and Rainbow Dark Dragon, monsters in your monster zone with card effects. So it has that sort of protection effect. That's kind of neat, but what we're more interested in is its monster effect. You contribute this card, add one Crystal Beast monster, Ultimate Crystal monster, or Crystal Smaller Trap card from your deck to your hand. So this effect is basically a worse version of Rainbow Bridge. Yes, it does search monsters, which Rainbow Bridge does not. That's kind of neat. In general, though, this card simply is too slow. It takes your normal summon to basically do what Rainbow Bridge could have done. And the thing here to remember is that while Rainbow Bridge is a card that can't search monsters, it can search Crystal Bond, so it doesn't really matter. And this all is without using your normal summon. So the one cool thing about this card still is that even though, yeah, it does have that versatility or just adding anything, that's really not why this card is good. The reason this card is good is because it's a Pendulum monster, and if you were somehow to make a Crystal Beast Pendulum deck, maybe with like Metal Foes or something, I really have no idea, but if you were somehow to set up a Crystal Beast Pendulum deck, you could Pendulum summon this every single turn and tribute it. It's also not a hard once per turn effect, which means that if you have multiple copies, you can search multiple things. In general, though, I mean, Rainbow Bridge also isn't a hard once per turn effect. Crystal Bond is, but Rainbow Bridge isn't, which makes this card in a really weird spot, and it doesn't really have a lot of synergy with the rest of the deck. It seems like a brick a lot of the times, and that's not good because this is the best card of the four. But back 4 years ago, this thing would have been really good. It would have been really good in tandem with the next card we're going to look at, which is Crystal Protector. So this is the 4 monster. The other one's level 3 monster. They have scales 2 and 5, so you can sort of pendulum summon whatever Crystal Beast monster you want. Its pendulum effect is each turn the first Crystal Beast cards or Ultimate Crystal monsters you control that would be destroyed by a card effect is not destroyed. So you can see if you have both these cards in your scales, while they don't really have sort of advantage gaining effects in the scales, they are protecting your cards. They're protecting them from targeting, and then this one's protecting them from the first destruction per turn. I think that's all right. It's okay. I mean, it's not amazing. 4 years ago, when we were sort of new in the pendulum summoning mechanic, I'd say that this actually did look pretty good. Because remember, I mean, 4 years ago, the pendulum cards that were out, besides Cliff Hordes, just weren't good enough to be played, so the competition was a lot lower. If you look at these cards compared to modern Yu-Gi-Oh!, yeah, they're not going to look so hot. But back in the day, these cards probably wouldn't have been that terrible, and I might have even played them next to, like, Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon, or that's what that card is called, Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon? Yeah, obviously. That's what it is. It's an Odd Eyes monster, it's a dragon, it's a pendulum. Anyway, these cards would have been played. I think my original idea for these cards being played was 3 copies of Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon, 3 copies of each of these. Anyway, the monster effect. During damage calculation, if your Crystal Beast monster battles an opponent's monster, you contribute this card from your hand or field. Your battling monster's attack and defense each become double its original attack and defense during that damage calculation only, but it is destroyed at the end of the damage step. So this is like a worse honest. The obvious appeal here, once again, is that it's a pendulum monster, so you can do that every single turn. I don't think that effect's very good. I don't think this card is very good. Even 4 years ago, the only real selling point of this card was that it helped complete your pendulum scale, but I think now that we have the pendulum zones in the back row, you really don't want to have pendulum scales set up. I think Vanguard tributing itself once is kind of neat, I guess, and I think if the pendulum scales moved out of the back row, which isn't going to happen, but if that happened, I think then maybe this card would be viable. Crystal Protector then falls under the category of the cards that I was talking about a couple videos ago, where I was mentioning cards that were way too fair. It doesn't have enough of an upside to actually be considered a competitive option for Crystal Beast, and it's also not really even good in a sort of casual Crystal Beast build, simply because it doesn't do enough and it blocks up your back row. Anyway, let's look at the quick play spell. This card is called Over the Rainbow. This card is awful, so if a monster whose original name is Rainbow Dragon or Rainbow Dark Dragon activate its effect this turn while you controlled it, special summon any number of Crystal Beast monsters with different names from your deck. Yeah, this card is terrible. If you do play a Rainbow Dragon card in a Crystal Beast deck, even casually, it's most likely going to be Rainbow Overdragon, because that card's actually kind of not terrible. But both Rainbow Dragon and Rainbow Dark Dragon, well, Rainbow Dark Dragon isn't as bad as Rainbow Dragon, but it's not really good in a Crystal Beast deck. It's more good in like a random Dark deck. Anyway, Rainbow Dragon's terrible. You're never going to play this card, so don't think about it. That's kind of like the most disappointing of the imports, but I understand that we have to get it with the other 3. So the last card is called Crystal Horde. A lot of people really like this card. I'm not sure how great it is. So it has 2 effects here. Once per turn, if a face-up Crystal Beast monster you control is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can special summon one Crystal Beast monster from your deck. It's kind of like Human Wave Tactics, that card with Moki Moki on the picture. I guess that's okay. I mean, it's a trap. It's kind of slow. And I hate just saying like, oh, it's a trap card. You can't play it in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! But I think when I looked at this card way back in 2014, I also said you can't really play this card in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! I just don't think this card is that good. But also the second effect is you can send this face card from the field to the graveyard, then target one Crystal Beast monster, one Crystal Beast card you control, and one other card on the field. Return them to the hand. You cannot activate these effects in the same chain. The important part here is that you can't activate them in the same chain, which means that if you have this card set, you can't simply like flip this thing up in response like your opponent Regeki your Crystal Beast monster and then immediately use like the return effect. I don't really know when that would ever come up, because I guess with the Regeki you wouldn't have any monsters to bounce anyway, but you can't use in the same chain. That's the important part. That will come up occasionally, not super often. It does say you can target one Crystal Beast card you can control. The problem there is that there's only Crystal Beast monsters, so it just bounces a monster. Basically, you send this card to the grave, and in the best sense, you can think this card is like, oh, it's a Magispector Kirin for Crystal Beast. In the worst sense, you can look at this card and say, okay, this is actually just a strictly worse compulsory evacuation device for Crystal Beasts. And depending on if you're sort of a glass half full with the Kirin or a glass half empty with the Compulse, you might think this card's a lot better than it is. But the thing that I'm trying to say here, the thing that you probably just realized, that these cards aren't good. They did not age well. I think it's cool that we're finally getting them. I think it's cool that Konami is sort of catching up with these older OCG imports. I still have to say at the end here, I know I mentioned at the beginning, I'll just briefly say it. I think Patchwork would have been a much better import, mostly for the reason that these cards have not aged well, where Patchwork actually would be good in a modern Fluffle deck, and we haven't been waiting for Patchwork quite as long as we've been waiting for these cards, but Patchwork is a lot more relevant for a rogue deck that people are actually playing, unlike these cards, which even if you really use like the loosest definition of rogue deck and say Crystal Beasts are a rogue deck, even in that case, no one's really playing these cards in a Crystal Beast deck, so I don't really need these cards anymore. I think they would have fit much better in a sort of Dragons of Legend type set, not a main set, so it's kind of disappointing. Maybe one day we'll see Fright for Patchwork. Who knows? I surely don't, because it seems like every set we don't get it, and it just gets worse and worse. But anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed this discussion video, sort of reimagining the Crystal Beast strategy in a modern sense with these older cards. See if you want to play them. Let me know what you think about them. Maybe I'm completely wrong. I don't think I am. I think I've played plenty of Crystal Beasts to know that these cards aren't that fantastic. It is truly disappointing that it took this long to get these cards, because they would have been cool additions to a fun casual deck 4 years ago. Nowadays, though, we just have so many better options for that deck, like Crystal Bonds and Rainbow Bridge, so I don't really see a place for these cards in a Crystal Beast strategy. Anyway, though, I'll see you guys later. Goodbye.